like to call the December 14th meeting of the Environmental Resource Committee to order. Can we stand and pledge allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right.
First order of business is the draft agenda. I have one change I would like to make. I would like to move number 5 up to number 3. We have John Corbett and Pete Larkin attending today's meetings as members of the Community Action Team with the Resilience Program.
If that's the motion, I'll second it.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, so we'll go right into the Community Action Team meeting. We called a meeting of the action team today to talk about the impacts of Hurricane Ian. And I think everybody has seen the report of the observations that were put together on the hurricane. And there are other areas of the town and the island that were affected by it that just wanted to be sure that we had all the information available. I can't find it.
See your agenda.
No,
That's something else.
that's something else.
I don't have one.
Let's see it. Go on.
You, sir. Oh, thank you, sir.
Let me start out by kind of reviewing the observations that we reported to town council about. The National Weather Service out of Wilmington recorded that we have maximum sustained winds of 45 miles an hour at a little bit before 4 o'clock in the afternoon. The maximum wind gusts in the Sunset Beach area were 74 miles an hour. The rainfall recorded at the Gore Bridge was 3.77 inches. And we had a storm surge of approximately 6 feet on top of the tide at the time the surge occurred. The high tide occurred at 11:30. The low tide occurred at 5:38.
Is that AM or PM? AM.
11:30 a.m.
Okay. Gotcha.
and 5:38 p.m.
Gotcha.
So the storm surge came in somewhere between 2 and 3 o'clock. So the surge came in as the tide was going out. But from other people I've talked to, the ebb tide was hindered by the storm surge, so there was still a lot of water in the ocean. The direction of the winds were the National Weather Service from the buoys and other markers. The winds came out on the compass at 160 degrees. If you look at if you stand on the beach with a compass, you look at 160 degrees, it's coming pretty much straight in from the ocean. So it's the south-southeast wind direction. I would comment that, and I won't mention names, but one of the local um, people from Ocean Isle Beach had a letter to the editor in the Beacon this week about the reports of storm erosion on Ocean Isle Beach. And he was challenging the reports as that it couldn't possibly be right. But with a wind direction of 160 degrees, that wind was blowing straight into Tubbs Inlet. So it would cause erosion on the west end of Ocean Isle Beach. The rainfall would get soaked up pretty fast, but the storm surge came in Tubbs Inlet. It got behind the island. It came in the Little River Inlet, and it came in the Shallotte Inlet. And that all poured a lot of water into the intercoastal waterway, which got in behind the island. The storm surge eroded the face of the dunes in many areas, but the dunes were not breached. From reports, the flooding occurred on the island, on the backside of the island. It flooded over the Causeway Road, and it flooded over Shoreline Drive on the north side of the Intercoastal Waterway. The worst mainland flooding was on the east end of Shoreline Drive. So let's talk about the conditions that occurred on the island. John, you live on Canal Street. Maybe you could share with us what was experienced there.
During the high tide portion, Canal Street from at least 6th Street to about 15th and maybe a little bit further east, in the street itself had about 18 inches of water, which means it had come up over the bulkhead. Looking to the north to North Shore Drive to Riverside, it was apparent that both of those streets had flooded over. I can't tell you how deep it was, but there was all water. So basically from 6th Street through the Fish Streets and the Finger Canals up into the Bay area and along the feeder canal between North Shore and Riverside, all of that was inundated with during the peak of the storm, as you said, pointed out roughly around 2 to 3. The water came up probably starting at about noon, I'm estimating, and by about 4 o'clock or so, it had gone back down, and streets were all passable. I don't know about the causeway. The police reported that the causeway was flooded, and then there were reports that back on 40th Street, between North Shore up into Bay Street, 40th Street area had flooded. And I don't know how deep or how much.
At last month's meeting, one of the residents there, Katie,
Yeah.
She shared with us that there was 6 feet of water over the ground of inundation at her house.
6 feet?
6 feet,
I mean, she couldn't stand outside. It was up over her head.
right.
Okay.
They were not there then.
Yeah.
The house were renters in the house at the time, but the water came up high enough that it lifted the dock up off of the pilings. I don't think 18 inches would be enough to do anything like
Well, it was
that.
18 inches by the street, so it comes up over the bulkheads. We had we had one boat on canal that was tied up to that was tied up to a dock, and both the boat and the dock floated away. I don't know if it went up over the pilings or it just broke off. I don't know how it was hooked up. I
But there was,
I would say if there was a 6 feet surge at the east end of the island, there would have been much more water than 18 inches in the middle of Canal Street. I judged 18 inches by standing in it. It was up to my knee,
right.
a little bit over. May have been over at that end of the island. I don't know, the dynamics of a storm surge. But it really was not much different than Isaias and actually, what was it, Matthew, about 4 years ago, in terms of coming up over, staying there for 3 or 4 hours until the tide went down and going back down. On the
Okay.
part that I could see, I had no visibility, no understanding what went on there.
Again, Katie said that, and I can't pronounce it. ICAS was 4 feet and Ian was 6 feet at their location.
Can they be talking about the measured storm surge as opposed to freeboard of water standing above her roadway? I mean, we could just be talking about different terms because the water level is significantly below her. What is that? Inland is the road that she lives on?
Oh, she lives on Bay Street.
Bay Street. Okay.
Bay Street.
But the Bay Street obviously is above the mean high water level.
Yeah,
not
well,
very
I'm
high.
talking about 18 inches high in the middle of the
In
road.
the middle of
The
road.
water to come over the dock and I can't tell you how high that amounts to in terms of the if you will, the tidal surge that came up there,
Okay.
which could have been higher.
Well,
I
there's
don't know.
all kind of different elevations
Yeah.
and different places on the island.
Yeah.
But so Canal Street had 18 inches. Main Street, you said, had storm water back up
I didn't walk out to Main Street, and I'm not aware of
of any storm.
of what flooding or surge that took place out there on Main Street itself.
Okay.
I've talked to several people. Nobody talked about water coming up over. In fact, the surges on the north side of Canal, on Canal Street, surge came up over 18 inches in the middle, and then you have houses on the ocean side of Canal Street, and it came up about a foot in the driveway, and it did not get into go underneath the houses or anything. So that would make me think there wasn't much there to go
Right.
to go into Main Street.
Was there any known property damage? I mean,
There were some docks that broke loose, and there was mainly the main damage that people had was when we had the winds from the south that sustained for about 4 or 5 hours. They were quite high, and people lost roof shingles and siding and stuff like that.
We probably had, I know the fire department responded to slightly less than a dozen areas where major trees had fallen on residential structures. We also cleared probably another dozen or more large trees that had fallen across streets within the municipality and had to cut them up and move them out of the way so that emergency traffic could proceed.
that was on the mainland,
On the mainland, there's
You
virtually no trees on the island.
and you couldn't get to the island anyway.
Well, there was a short period of time during high tide where you could not get through the causeway, but for the majority of the time, particularly during the winds, you could get on the island.
Well,
The bridge was closed because of wind.
I was on the island just before they closed the bridge, and the water was right up to the edge.
Yeah. Well, the water ended up, the last we saw it, there was probably a foot of water or more, maybe more than that, on the causeway. It had breached the causeway.
Yeah.
I was hoping Dustin could be here. Lisa had told me before that they have some video that shows 3 feet of water over the causeway. I don't, maybe that's localized in one area. I don't know if it's the whole thing.
Well,
I've always been curious about the elevation of the roadway. And I don't know,
there's the portion of the causeway right before you get up onto the island is the lowest part, and it has flooded during storms, and it is flooded through sometimes the right moon phases, which with high tides to match, but it's not been, if you will, sustained flooding.
right. East Oasis had much higher winds with it than Ian did. And I understand that the wind-driven water took rocks from the edge of the road onto the surface of the road.
It moved the marl that were as big as softballs and even bigger than that, big as footballs. It moved it from the east side of the causeway over to the west side of the causeway because we spent an entire day moving them back over to the other side.
But we didn't experience that with Ian.
No, not with Ian. No, nothing.
Okay.
There was marsh grass that washed onto the causeway that had to be removed by heavy equipment, but none of the riprap on the east side was mobilized across the causeway during Ian. During Matthew, it was for sure. I'm sorry, Isiasis, or however you pronounce that.
Okay. The reason I'm asking questions and want to talk about this is because I want the climate committee to get together after we get this together, we get this information and look at the resilience strategy that we have for the town and see if there's changes and priorities that should be made to the projects that we do.
I know that the town staff has gone on official record notice to the Department of Transportation that the causeway is a extremely serious issue and that the raising of the causeway needs to be a priority for the DOT. They've also talked about some areas on West Shoreline Drive as well.
West or east?
West.
Well, I know the water on the West Shoreline Drive came right up to the edge of the road right by the.
What they're basing that on is alternate routes where people can in fact evacuate, and the West Shoreline blocks quite a few people. Where the East isn't as it's a severe problem, but the East is a town road, East Shoreline, so the DOT would not be involved in that,
right.
From a notification standpoint, if you will. And plus, the people there can go out to the east or out to the west to find alternate evacuation routes if they had to.
It's a good point because the bridge over the Calabash River was inundated.
Yes.
And
Not
that was closed.
It was. Yes, it was closed. You're exactly right.
And the water going up the Calabash River floods in the marsh area up by Oyster Bay Golf Course. And there's an overflow from that marsh area right in front of Candace's house that goes down to the Twin Lake. And as much as Candace could look on that, you might tell us what you saw over there.
Well, normally you don't see the Calabash River unless you're way at that end of the golf course. And that river extended all the way by the 18th hole, extended all the way there, and all you'd see was the little hillocks of the golf course and the trees. So the water came all the way up there. I saw stuff like somebody's dock floating down there across the golf course, and the water did come up as far. It came up as far I could, and especially I went back the next day to look and sort of see where it was moving. just moving stuff. It went up to shoreline, but did not. I don't believe it went on shoreline.
Did it go over the cart path along the 18th hole? Or
It
did
went over part of the cart.
Okay. So
It
if
had,
it
it
had,
had to get to approach shore.
if it had spilled over, would have
It would have
gone
spilled over
down
into Sterling's.
into Twin Lakes.
Yeah, the resident that's in the most vulnerable spot right there, Candace and I know him well, and he said that since he's lived there, he's been there probably 22 years now, or 20 years now. He said the water has never breached Shoreline Drive or Lakeshore Drive, but it's come very close. In this last storm with Ian, it came very close.
Again, looking to the future from a resilience standpoint, if the forecast for climate change are correct and the intensity of storms is going to increase, and we have a marker here of tropical storm with 6 feet of storm surge. And in my mind, the town kind of got filled right up to the brim of the glass that we're in. And there are some areas that didn't become a problem that might be problems in the future in worse conditions.
I was going to mention, my house was on Stokes Drive, and I have a camera. I watched the whole thing, and it was like a wall of water pouring over my berm in my yard. My house is base of my house is at 7 feet above sea level. It was right up to the edge of it, and then it surrounded my entire house, and the whole street basically was underwater halfway up Stokes. I mean, I saw it on camera that my friends went over and took pictures. And then that road, those ponds between on Shoreline there, the road is underwater right there.
Yeah, what is it?
So-
3?
Along Stokes?
No, along
No.
Shoreline
Yeah,
Drive.
Stokes. Yeah, where
Yeah,
I'm at
where-
on the end of Stokes, the
East.
whole entire thing was underwater. I got pictures of it, footage. You could see the water just pouring over
Yeah.
the into my yard. And then
Is your yard on Turtle Creek? Is
no, it's
your,
on Turtle Creek's on the other side.
the other side?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm just on the intercoastal. But yeah, I've had the house since 2003. Matthew was kind of bad. Isaias was kind of bad, but that one was worse. Ian was worse. And I think I can't imagine what it'd be if you doubled it, like you went from 6 feet to 12 feet. The storm surge would be. I have flood insurance, but I'm just saying it was pretty scary.
Okay. Are there any other locations anyone is aware of that are kind of new information to possible storm problems in the future? I think Ian is kind of a test case for us. It was a close call to being much more damaging storm. The storm started out to landfall in Charleston, came ashore in Pawleys Island and Georgetown area. And the farther north it got, the worse our conditions became. And it happened very quickly. And I know I was not as prepared for a hurricane.
Well, the projections were a tropical depression.
Right. And
You know,
that's really what it was.
35 mile an hour. But when we started popping up in the afternoon to 75 mile an hour, probably, I would guess gust or we sat through a couple hurricanes, Category 1 hurricanes, and just subjective on evaluation on my part is when the winds hit directly from the south, there was stronger winds hitting than we felt in a couple of the other hurricanes. But it was one of my concerns was it seemed like our whole area was taken by surprise, not by our, not as a result of anything we did or did not do, but following the forecast from the National Weather Service in coming up, and until almost the time that it started to hit us, we did not have a good indication that we were going to be hit by anything as strong and with as much impact as Ian had.
Well, after
Which
the
is not something we're going to solve, but that's
after the main part of the eye passed us, I went outside and I said, "Boy, we really skirted it." And then, like you just said, John, for the next 4 or 5 hours, we had extreme winds tailing in from the backside of it, and that's what caused the damage. It blew in the high tide. It advanced the water with the wind speed. It also, once the ground was saturated, the winds that were sustained blew over a lot of trees. We lost power in a significant amount of the town. And wind-driven, as I said, wind-driven water was a key factor. But
When you look at the
it surprised
dynamic,
Florida as well too, with 2 different landfalls. So
Here's my yard.
I think we all understand
I
hurricane
believe it.
circulation is counterclockwise. And we were on the east side of the eye of the storm, which is the strongest area for storm problems. And that's what really drove the storm surge. We were far enough away that the winds were only strong tropical storm level. But I mean, they said we have 45-mile-an-hour sustained winds. That's a good tropical storm. But we had 75-mile-an-hour gusts, and a lot of people think they were on higher than that. So
yeah.
and I would agree with that from where I live.
Yeah.
But yeah, we were caught by surprise somewhat.
Yeah.
And I don't know what we can do from a hazard management standpoint to be better prepared for that.
Well, one of the things that just my neighbors and I discussed is don't be as complacent as we were with the forecast for Ian this time. You know, when there's a storm coming, prepare for it because you don't know when it's going to change, what the path is going to be. You hope it doesn't strengthen, but you can still have the impact. I mean, we went through and did sort of our minimal high wind securing things. We did not do our hurricane high wind. Just our specific house, if the wind had come from the north, we would have had significant sort of outside damage from furniture, flower pots, and stuff like that blowing around. So it was a surprise. I'd like to sort of interject just with sort of a commercial, and as we move towards our RCC CCP discussion, before this committee was formed, the council approved a climate change impact measures program that laid out things to be done over a period of time. Many of the things have been happened, but in the phase 2 of that, 2020 to 2025, the very first thing on that was to initiate discussion of a long-term plan with NCDOT to raise the low-lying road beds, such as along Sunset Boulevard South, that's the causeway, as a key problem. And we've had, since this was adopted in January 2019, you know, we've had a couple of storms that indicate we need to push a lot harder with NCDOT to start coming up with some measures and solutions to put the causeway up, because that's, you know, it's vulnerable, as we saw. I think it was with ICAS, whichever one wiped out a lot of the riprap along the edge, that a high impact tidal surge along there could potentially just cut the road off, remove it, unless we do something to take care of it.
Well, with Ian, Calabash River Bridge was flooded.
Yeah.
There was flooding up to the edge of the road on Shoreline West.
Yeah.
And it was, we were very close to flooding over Twin Lakes, which would have cut off Shoreline Drive West. And we have all the people on the west end of town out there that would have been stranded.
Well, you know,
They are going to start the building a new bridge over the Calabash River, I think this coming summer.
This, yeah, August,
Yeah,
September,
and,
after the summer season.
They're going to raise that bridge up 9 feet, right? A causeway, the surface elevation of that road is 3 feet above sea level. So that road needs to be raised quite a ways to provide
Yeah.
evacuation and emergency services.
Yeah, and at this point in time, it's a very different process than just putting in a new bridge.
Yes.
And just to point out, it was late 2018, 2019, when the community started pushing on GSATs to get NCDOT to do something very serious about that Calabash River Bridge, because it's been vulnerable for a long time, and this continues to prove that. So as much as we don't like the inconvenience we're going to have, it's really important to replace that bridge.
Okay.
Yeah.
it's interesting to interject here that this area is not the only part of Brunswick County has flooding issues on the roads. I know Town Creek floods Highway 17. It was a heck of a flood during Floyd. And coming out of the Oak Island area, NC 211 floods there for the Lockwood Valley River, goes under the NC 211 just south of Highway 17 intersection. There's a couple places on NC 133 that flood during a major event. So I say that to say that that part of the county has the same concerns we have here with getting out of Dodge.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we're not alone.
There's a
John, can I talk about some good news when you get to a break point?
okay.
Go ahead.
Are you?
Are there any other observations anyone cares to share?
I'll point out one other thing here. Earlier, somebody mentioned about 3.7 inches of rain. I live in Windfall. We had 1.75 inches of rain. Now that may or may not mean anything at all, but kind of tied to that, I happen to notice in today's Wilmington paper we're about 20 inches below normal for this area. So we're in a drought here for whatever that's worth. Probably not much right now, but
I think John mentioned that if we hadn't been in a drought,
yeah,
it would have been harder to absorb that water.
yeah, we're in a pretty serious drought, or
John,
somewhat serious.
I think you mentioned that the storm surge came up Tubbs Inlet. So when that's dredged, how will that impact?
Tubbs Inlet's not going to
Not
be
going to be
dredged.
dredged.
Oh, it won't be dredged. Okay.
No.
They've postponed doing any more dredging?
No, Tubbs Inlet has not been on any of our
Okay.
proposals
jinx.
for dredging.
If I could rephrase your question, the dredging that the town's doing, how would that be affected?
Yeah.
Okay, we don't know. At least I don't know. But one of the suggestions that was made to me by other people in the state was to get some drone pictures of the
Of those areas.
Jinks Creek area and Tubbs Inlet and see how the channel and the shoals have changed, not just from Ian, but from Ethiasis as well, because both storms were very impactful in the Tubbs Inlet area. And trying to work with the police department right now to do that in January. But theoretically, the water came in the Tubbs Inlet, flowed through the main channel, flowed over the shoal, and went up the creeks, and it flooded all the way out to the north side of the intercoastal waterway. So it may have moved some sediment back into the areas that have been dredged. I don't know. I don't know if they've done a survey since they've
Not since then. No.
but we're trying to get some aerial pictures to be able to see what's going on in Tubbs Inlet and how it's affected by these storms.
Well, I remember that you showed us the initial things getting up to that.
Right.
And it was really interesting to see how much things were changing.
I found pictures of Tubbs Inlet going back to the 60s, aerial photographs. And it's just really interesting to see how it was changed when, well, I actually go back to the 50s, when Gore bought the area and then started developing, and how he rechanneled Tubbs Inlet before Kama became along, and the changes that have taken place since then. Every time there is a major coastal storm, NOAA has aerial photographs of the coastline taken. And you can see what impacts the storm has. The aerial photograph after Ian is more at high tide than low tide. So you can't really distinguish the channeling or the shoaling.
There's too much water.
There's too much water. So with drone technology now, we can get aerial pictures pretty readily at low tide areas and see
See
where
it better.
where everything's going. No other observations to share. Okay, Pete, give us some good news.
Some good news. Mr. Corbett, John Farrell, myself, Chad was involved in it. We sat for a community action teams, CAT is what it's called. And what our goal was is to respond to the North Carolina Division of Coastal Management, which has a program, and they were encouraging coastal communities in North Carolina, of which we were invited, to submit a project or more, multiple projects were allowed, for their Resilient Coastal Communities program. And so earlier this year, we sat down and we looked at a number of different situations, some of which John has reiterated here again. We call them problem areas within the town. And one of the problem areas that we put together a request for a grant for engineering and design had to do with 40th Street on our island. And I've provided you an aerial photograph of the area where this project is located. It's on 40th Street, and it's on the north end of 40th Street. And this one problem area consists of two different locations, and they're numbered 1 and 2 on your photograph. A little difficult to see, but there's solid yellow, greenish yellow lines that dictate the area. We were successful in receiving from the Division of Coastal Management a grant for almost $50,000, which is focused on the engineering and design to fix this 40th Street erosion, sediment, and flooding problem during storms. We've been awarded that. We put out a request for quotation on RFQ earlier this year, and we received one bid for the engineering and design of it, and it's from McGill and Associates. And they are right now working on an engineering and design to resolve this location so we can come up with an engineering solution for it. They will develop construction drawings that will then go out to bid to contractors. And at that point in time, once we, as the town, this is going before town council at the January 9th meeting, council will then hopefully determine that we want to move forward with this. And once the engineering and design is done and the scope of work and an engineer's estimate has been determined for the construction costs, we will then go out to bid. We will get bids from hopefully numerous bidders, and then we will move forward to do this work. And at that same time, we will apply for other grants, which we believe are available from either the North Carolina Division of Coastal Management or other programs within the state or federal that would deal with communities like ourselves. for storm protection. We're pleased to have been selected as one of these recipients, and we're now going to move forward with it. The scope of work really consists of, and I highlighted it in yellow on the sheet that I gave you, it's really both the east and west sides of 40th Street in two different locations along the north side of 40th Street, which you show as sections 1 and 2 in that photograph. And that would involve approximately 275 foot of bank stabilization and also a significant amount of potentially living shorelines that would be constructed as a part of this solution. And McGill and Associates is working on that complete final design now, and hopefully we'll have that ready for town council next month.
Thank you, Peter. Are there questions about that?
One of the things just to keep in mind, once it goes out for the RFP and we get proposals back in, within that, it's called phase 4 of this program of the implementation of this RCCP, is to go out for grants. And the Division of Coastal Management, who are overseeing this whole program, in the early part of this program has advised there are lots of grants out there to apply for, and their experts will provide some assistance in doing that, which remains to be seen how that gets actually done. But
Well, I talked to them at the last CRC meeting, and they said they were very willing to write letters of support to go out with those grant requests to try to get us some priority consideration for funding.
are they doing anything such as, I mean, you can ask them at the next meeting perhaps, identifying and providing to the towns kind of list of places to go, what organizations provide those grants?
Yes, well,
Yeah.
they have done some of that already. That's been in the program literature, but I imagine they'll keep that updated, and we can ask for updated list of places to go to for grants. Yeah, I'll follow up with that. Now, I would only add one thing to what Pete talked about, is that we are not going to be able to make changes in 40th Street that are going to stop flooding and stop erosion. What we intend to do here is significantly reduce the impacts of those things.
It's a stabilization project.
It's a stabilization, so it's not going to be a correction problem. The water can get high enough to go over anything you put in there. So, but this should make a big improvement in what's going on. Erosion protection, particularly this type of erosion protection, is considered nature-based solutions. This is a priority for the state. These types of programs are very high on their lists. They're very cost effective. They're easily done, relatively inexpensively compared to infrastructure. An infrastructure change would be like the causeway, raising the road from the bridge to the island 10 feet. We can only imagine what that would entail and what it would cost. So I would also add that the what we went through with the phase 1 and phase 2 program, the DCM is now going out for a second round of projects with other communities, and we have neighbors in Ocean Isle Beach and Holden Beach that who I become friends with through the CRC. I will encourage them on our behalf to take a look at that. learn from our experience. Because I think this has been helpful. Um, Now, what I want to do, I said before, is I want to take this information, I'll meet with Steve, and we'll go over the resilience strategy, and we'll come up with some revisions and recommendations, and then we'll feed that back to, we'll work with Chad and Lisa on that, and then we'll feed that back to council for review and feedback. Okay?
Sounds good.
Thank you, gentlemen, for
Is there anything else?
one other thing, trivia. The city manager in Fort Myers, Florida, used to be the county manager here, Marty Law. He was manager here till about 8 or 10 years ago. Then he went to Greensboro or Guilford County. I saw an interview and right after the storm with him on TV. I thought, I know that guy. I bet he's wishing he wasn't in Fort Myers now because they got hammered.
Oh yeah, bad.
All right. Why don't we take a couple minute break and we'll let Pete and John depart, and then we'll resume with the normal ERC meeting. All right? Thank you, gentlemen. All right, we'll resume the ERC meeting after the Community Action Team Resilience meeting. We have no public to comment on the agenda, so the next item is the minutes from September, October, and November. I have marked up the minutes with some changes that I would like to see made. In September, there's a comment that Don requested that the meeting be the meeting in November be moved because of a recycling conflict, but I believe it was more accurate that I requested the meeting to be moved because I had to attend a CRC meeting. And so I'll give that to Steve.
Okay.
On October, the old business item 2, an awarded grant working with McGill Associate. That was to bid the engineering plans, and the phase 4 should drop. I think we can delete that. And then on
Okay.
the second page, you named Lindsay Smith as attending the meeting and commenting, and her name is Lynn Neesmith.
Okay.
So I'll give you those changes to be made.
Okay.
And then in November, Elizabeth Smith came to visit us, and her name is not spelled correctly. It's more of an English spelling than an American spelling. And then there's some comments under the new business, and I'll just give these to Steve.
Okay.
So Steve, if you could correct those,
I will correct them.
then we will we can approve those at the January meeting.
Okay.
Did anyone else have any comments about the meeting minutes? Moving on. Old
Do we need to approve or defer those items, or?
I think we'll defer that
Okay.
until we get the revised.
No problem. No problem. Just want to be straight. That's it.
Okay.
All right.
Old business, Earth Day, Arbor Day planning. Chad, did you want to speak to that?
Yeah, I'll be brief. I did have a brief conversation with Mila and Candace before today's meeting as we were waiting to get started there. The application has been submitted. I didn't realize, and I've told Mila and Candace this, that John did fill out the updated application before the town council approved the text amendments. I already have that. I know they're working on sealing permissions for parking from surrounding businesses and neighbors. The deadline application that I have given them has been January 15th, so we can get on the February TRC agenda, get comments back, at least from the police and fire department, public works department, and administrative staff. Because this is a town-sponsored event, it's going to operate a little bit differently than other ones, but it's not going to be drastically different. There can be some things before staff can officially, prove that everything's good to go. But if there's 1 or 2 permission slips that need to be done, that's something we can work with. I don't want to wait till get this application into February to get on the March TRC, because then that puts us up to beginning of March, addressing comments, getting things done, and then we're looking at an Arbor Day celebration in late April. So I'd rather have it in February to give us that extra time. And that's kind of where staff's at. I know Mila and Rich and Candace are working on things in the background. And then I'm sure that's going to be one of the things that get brought up later on. So,
Right. Any questions for Chad on that? Well, we'll talk more about that on the Green Subcommittee
I think
report.
Rich had mentioned he was going to talk with you or meet with you something about the budget.
yeah, I need to write down budget. I will get a figure. I'll talk to Lisa and Terry in the next couple of days and make sure I get that information to the three of y'all.
Partly because we
Got to order. Yep. Okay.
Next item is the Phase 3 update on the resilience program, and I think we talked a lot about that in the CAT meeting. Is
Yeah,
there anything
Mr. Chairman.
else?
Mr. Chairman, I'll defer everything to really what Pete said. Pete seemed to have a good grasp and on where we're at. I've not been in all those meetings, especially since the last time that John, and Pete met with Lisa and I and Dustin. I know Lisa's been doing a lot of stuff in the background, working with McGill and getting stuff together to get the project out for bid to where we can roll through Phase 3 that we've already been awarded a grant for, and then hopefully set us up pretty good for Phase 4 to get this on the ground. And that's kind of just where I've been with it.
Okay. New business items. The subcommittee discussions, the climate subcommittee. We've had the CAT meeting. Now we can take that, and I'm going to get together with Steve and see what we want to do with that. The other part of that was of the report that we wrote about Ian was getting drone photographs, and we're going to try to arrange in January. January has some very, very low tide conditions later in the month, around the 23rd or 4th.
Okay.
And we're going to try to set it up for the police department or the fire department to use the town's drone equipment to get some pictures.
So they're not going to do it on Christmas Eve then?
No, we're going to give everybody a holiday.
you would have confused all those little kids looking for reindeer.
Right. You might think it's like Santa drone.
Mhm.
But again, there have been some statements made in the public. There's a lot of people that are very critical and emotional about not just the dredging program, but about storm problems that have occurred in different places, and I think it's very clear that with Hurricane Ian, the winds came into Tubbs Inlet from the south-southeast. 160 degrees is pretty much head on at that point. And that would do erosion on the west end of Ocean Isle Beach, and that would cause a lot of flooding in behind both Ocean Isle Beach and Sunset Beach. Now, the main channel in Tubbs Inlet goes up behind Ocean Isle Beach. It's deflected by the shoal along the east end of Sunset Beach, but the water went over that and got in behind and flooded. The water also came in the Charlotte Inlet and the Indian River Inlet to fill up the intercoastal waterway, and that's what flooded everything on the north side of the barrier island. So
Well, I think you said it too best because the storm, we were on the strong side of the storm.
we were on the
and it
east
was
side
pumping
of
all the water in into the, you're getting the full capacity of what's coming in.
right, and with ECASIS, the worst of the flooding was in Oak Island, and they had 85, 90 mile an hour sustained winds that the storm surge washed over the island. Um, we had much lower winds here, but they came out of the north, so they were less impactful from storm surge. But the water that got into the intercoastal waterway still flooded the north side of the island, but it wasn't as bad on the south side. The other thing I've come to realize is there's been comments made in the public about South Jenks Creek being a natural area that's never been dredged before, and that's just not supported by the facts. Back in the 60s, when the town was incorporated, the whole east end of the island was created by dredging the area behind the island. So South Jenks Creek, the main canal, the finger canals, that was all dredged. That material was put on the land and became the island that we live on today. South Jenks Creek is a man-made waterway, and it's not natural, and it has a long history since that time. I don't know all of the details about what was done in the 80s and 90s, but it hasn't been dredged in a long time, and it was dredged last year.
I'm just curious, when do they ever plan on dredging the intercoastal waterway ever again? Because they used to dredge it on a regular basis.
I have no idea.
I'm just wondering, that'd be something. I mean, it'd be interesting to find out because it seems like that's a government.
I think it's done on an as-needed basis.
Okay. I've never seen them do it since I've had my property. But
Yeah. Steve, do you have any other comments about climate activities?
no.
Okay.
I would just say if you have a meeting, if we have a subcommittee meeting, I'll be out until January 10th. So after that, I'm open. I'm going to be in Spain leaving next week.
Okay. Well, have fun. Keep an eye on the news reports and see what trouble you get into.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, just, yeah.
Subcommittee discussions, Green Subcommittee. Mila, you have a report to share?
Yes, so we started preparation for the Arbor Day 2023, which is 4 months from now. And we met with Chad to discuss just general concept. And then on December 2nd, Rich and Candace and I met to discuss our strategy and, thank you, and action plan. So it is a Sunset Beach Town event, and it's educational expo, environmental educational expo with participation of environmentally conscious nonprofit organizations and presenters on environmental protection topics. So we decided that at that event we don't want any food or merchandise for sale, and it will be only nonprofit organizations. The event topics would be reduce, reuse, recycle, RCCP, creating new and protecting existing green spaces, and also unique coastal Carolina and Brunswick County habitat. A few little tasks that we identified for us. First and foremost, Candice and I will reach out to local businesses to deliver first of all, to talk to them about the event, make them aware, solicit their cooperation and parking, and maybe discuss certain things that we can do together to promote those businesses. Maybe they can provide coupons for lunches for people so that they also benefit from the event. So I will draft an invitation email to the event participants, and then we'll submit it for the council's approval. After we have that approval and the text, we will send a collective email to the potential participants, those who were at the Arbor Day last year, and other nonprofits that we can find. So if you have any suggestions about any nonprofit that you're aware, let us know. We're planning to send invitations by January 22nd and ask the participants to RSVP by February 22nd, so a month later.
Can I ask a question?
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned several times in this to get the council meeting or council approvals.
Mm-hmm.
Chad, what do we have to do that? Do we have to come up with a comprehensive plan that we present to council, or can we go in item by item and ask for approval?
I will double check. I'm pretty sure this has already been approved by council.
Mm-hmm.
It just has to go through the temporary special event process, working with me to get that approval, make sure it meets the standards of the UDO.
Okay, so we don't need a.
I don't think there's anything that needs to go to council. I will double check and then provide that information to you very quickly. But to my knowledge, there's not anything that needs to be approved by council. It's just that you need to go through the UDO process to make sure everything meets, which I've presented all that to them, and they are working on doing that now. And that's why the application technically has already been submitted, but will be put on the TRC agenda for February, whatever that first Wednesday date is.
Okay, so
then-
these things have been sort of pre-approved. We
Uh,
just, but what we should do is come back to the ERC
Mm-hmm.
and say, all right, this is what we're going to do, and let everybody know about it and agree to it. And go ahead and do it.
But I was actually also asking specifically about the text of the invitation, because it's a Sunset Beach Town event. Can we say Sunset Beach Town is inviting you to participate, so addressing from the town?
Yeah, that would need to be just looked at by Lisa and I, and before we send it out.
And also, do we need the approved list of presenters, or we just let you know who responded and who is planning?
Yeah, you'll need to, eventually we'll get a list of, I think last year we just worked with a list of, hey, these people are coming, and solidified that. And then eventually, probably about a month out, working on a kind of a booth seating chart out in the park. So
That is for the vendors, well, for the nonprofits. What we were also thinking is that around these topics, we want to have presenters, and I actually attached a list of potential people who will speak on the topic, like 10 minutes a person, where people can come and listen to that presenter. And are we going to have a gazebo by then, do you know?
I want to say yes. I don't know. I know that Lisa is working on that. It's going out for bid. And I think, I know she's trying to get it done as quick as possible. So, and it might have to, I have to look at what our first concert date is as well. We should, I'll have an update. I'll try to get that to you. I want to say yes.
Okay.
But there are some things that could prohibit that from happening,
But-
but Lisa's going to put pressure on them. So
And then if it's not done, will we have to work around construction and make sure that the participants and the attendees are safe?
I will say this: if it's not done, yes, we would. And I'll have that
We could work with
information.
Public Works
Yeah,
on
we
how
could.
to rope
Yep.
it off.
The other thing is she's giving me a hard fast date for March 20 something. I think it's 26th. That I'm not allowed to approve any events in the park before that. So there's kind of the hard deadline. I think she's aiming for middle of March, maybe end of it, to have that thing completed to where we can move forward for our concert series, our markets in the park for spring and summer, and things, and then us as well. So
So what I was, just to clarify this, that by presenters, I meant that there will be people from Sunoco talking about recycling, people talking about waste, solid waste management, and things that are environmentally important, so that we could schedule them like 10 minutes and the public, if they're interested, they could come and listen. So that's what I meant. So do we need to have this list of potential presenters?
Same thing with the
approved?
vendors. You
Okay.
know, we could work with it that way. Yeah.
Okay.
And then-
The other thing is that I will draft a text of the press release for the Brunswick Beacon, and some kind of a like infomercial, I call it, information that we could place in Brunswick Beacon, maybe 2 weeks out of the event, before the event, to
Yeah.
make people aware.
Same thing with the
Mhm.
invitation. We'll need to get the language approved by staff, make
Yep.
sure it's okay with this board. And then Lisa will be the one to get that to the Beacon to make sure it's advertised.
Okay, and then closer to the event, we will coordinate all the logistics with TRC and the tents and all that.
Can I just jump in? Like,
Mhm.
I would absolutely try to use social media like Facebook and others.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, because you can invite literally 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 people
Yes.
in a second because of all these towns. Like you've got towns, there's all these different town organizations already.
Can you help us to set up Facebook? Oh, do we have
yeah.
Facebook?
And the other,
I don't
On
do
Sunset
and
Beach?
I'm not
No,
gonna.
I know
Last year I
you don't.
talked about. I mean, in my opinion, you get the people. You want to attract people that don't know about the environment. Okay, so it's kind of like a bait. I'd call it a bait and switch. You bring them in
Mhm.
because they think, oh, there's an event going on in the park,
Mhm.
and then they learn about this. You're trying to convert people that are because the people that are already like environmentally sensitive
Right.
or friendly, you already don't have to worry about them.
Yeah.
So you're trying to get people. So I don't know why you don't want to have food and other things, but to me, I would provide and get people. If people go like, okay, I mean, I would just do things that maybe food's not the right answer. You guys came up with this, that's fine. But I think you're trying to get
Steve,
people to
one of
show
the
up.
things about the food was that we don't want to be in competition with the local businesses around us.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that as Mila and I work with them is to see
Yeah.
if they may be willing to be
Yeah.
open and provide that service. So
Yeah.
that it's a win-win.
Yeah.
Instead of
Yeah,
we're just screwing up your traffic and
Right.
parking.
I was just saying, like in my opinion, you want to provide everything at any event that would get people to show up so that they learn about, like, if you have food, I know Rich mentioned something, you don't want to have waste. Well, maybe you have environmentally friendly. Like I looked on Amazon, they have beer cups, glasses that are green that will
Right.
biodegrade.
Yeah.
They're not.
Bamboo utensils and
But using to me Brunswick Beacon is okay, but nobody. I mean, I won't say nobody. Very few people are going to look at that. You're going to get a lot more attention with,
Facebook.
social media. Social media. I would say, like in my mind, I'm like, how do I get people to show up here that are anti, recycling, anti protecting the environment, so they learn. They go, oh, I didn't realize that, and they
Offer
learn
free
from it.
beer.
That's just my thought.
The
It's not
town
a
does
side
have a
effect.
Facebook page. I think last year we utilized that to where, again, the language was approved. We got the invitation out to where it was shareable for everybody. That way you could share it on your own personal, but it was officially coming from the town of Sunset Beach.
Okay. But so the town, you said, has Facebook presence?
We
Oh,
have that capability.
Oh,
So
yeah.
we will use that as
I
well.
can help you, but I'm
Perfect.
just
Yeah,
saying,
that's great. And that's pretty much it.
sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, that's a great point. Absolutely.
Before we move on, one of the things that we were discussing is what we would, first, what types of plants we want to offer this year. I think last year we did little magnolias and wax myrtles, and we didn't want to offer the same thing, so if people come, they're not getting the same. I think we kind of narrowed it down to probably like the little red maple seedlings, persimmon seedlings. For shrubs, we were going to do beautyberry, and then we had talked about doing native flowering plants, but I think we're going to do pink muhly grass because so many people like that, and we think it will survive. So we're kind of hung up on a specimen tree. Last year, we planted that one very nice magnolia. Rich's idea is to plant a few islands of trees. But Steve and John and I had walked through the park one day, and there's not great areas to put in multiple trees.
And-
But
Well,
maybe
if-
to add a magnolia by the magnolia that's there, and over time create a stand. He'd like to add 3 there this year. But that's partly dependent on budget. And one of the things he told me, and I don't know if you heard this, because he said that he thought you did, was that some of the council members were disappointed that we didn't go bigger last year. But if you try to put in a bigger tree, how do you keep it alive? You know, it's one thing, it's in your yard and you can water it every day, but
Well, the staff watered the magnolia tree. They kept it watered.
they did those
and
gators.
they had a water bag around
Yeah,
it.
but if you have a bigger tree, you're going to need probably like 4 gators out
Right.
there.
Well, and we've had drought conditions for the last several years,
Yeah.
and we don't know if that's going to continue or not.
Yeah.
If they're going to put a gazebo in that open area in the park, is there a landscaping plan that we could tie Earth Day, Arbor Day into to plant some, to do some plantings around the gazebo?
I'm not sure. I'll have to look and see what Lisa's plan is for that and talk to her. And I'll be able to provide something to you.
Okay. I mean, personally, I'm more of a mind to do something, to do fewer trees and maybe bigger trees than a lot of trees. We passed out a lot of stuff last year, and but there was a lot of stuff left over too. So
I think what we had left were the wax myrtles, and we probably ordered too much of something that's a very common shrub anyway, and so lots of people already have it in the yard. I think that's something that our group we still need to get together and figure out what quantities we want of things. But we're trying to look at things that will do well in our environment. One of the problems is, and Rich, I know Rich was concerned about, is like, they're so small, the seedlings that we give out, that they may not be surviving. But the difference in cost is like, where you can buy one of those seedlings for, say, $2, it could be $10 to $15 for something that's potted.
Right.
It's a huge difference in cost.
I have a few of those seedlings that are surviving just fine.
I got one of the magnolias that's doing.
I have a couple of, but the thing I was going to point out with the wax myrtle is that since we picked one of those up and put it and planted it, and it grows very fast.
Mm-hmm.
But now I'm seeing, and it's not from my wax myrtle, they're just popping up. Like, I thought they were weeds before, but wax myrtles pop up in the yard all the time.
Well, they produce those. They produce berries. So
yeah, so the birds get them and they drop them in the yard.
Yeah.
So we got wax myrtles all over the place.
From that one plant?
No, this is from other plants.
Yeah.
I don't know what the right answer is. I think we need to find some kind of a middle ground between a little and a lot. And I know Rich is concerned about the budget and because he wants to stay within a budget, but he wants to push it as far as he can. But
And I know he's hoping to get that grant, the EMC
right.
grant, but that's still unknown, so it's hard to really plan those
Right.
funds.
Speaking of that grant, Chad, did you get any more insight about submitting that grant request?
I did not. I'll look on the website today, but I have not.
If that's still not open,
No, it's open. It's just how I need to figure out I need to just figure out how to submit it because they're on the website. It was not allowing me to submit it.
okay. But if it's not allowing you to submit
I
it,
need to figure out how to submit it.
okay. If you
'Cause
want
we're-
help with that, let me know and I'll call them and find out about it.
Anybody else with thoughts on that? Especially those of you that were there last year.
The plants.
Fewer to give away, but larger.
How many trees did you have last year?
I think Hughes and Hughes told me they did 40 of the little magnolias.
Okay.
And we did run out of those. We ran out of them kind of early.
I think you'll end up with more people this year because it's on Saturday.
And then they
Yeah.
did 80 wax myrtles.
Yeah.
But I would probably switch to something different since you gave away those last year.
Well, yeah, we aren't doing those. So that's what I said when we looked at the list with Hughes and Hughes, and we're trying to come up with something that we think people would be interested in. It was to do a red maple tree, persimmon tree. So we've got two types we can offer, and doing a beautyberry bush, which lots of people don't already have in their yard, although they can spread just like the
Wax myrtles.
and then the muley grass.
When I was giving those away last year, people were excited about getting the plants. So I think you'll end up with more people this year. So, in my opinion, so
Did they seem like they like the small size? Was it?
I would
Did you
probably
hear that
stick
at
with
all?
the small size because the hope is, if they plant 5 of them or 10 of them, that 3 of them survive. So you got 3 new plants first. I mean, I don't, the thing is, if you get bigger ones, you may not have the money, right? So,
Well,
Well,
and it's easier to take something to your car if it's small.
Yeah.
I would think that most people that are interested could make it grow,
Well, it's certainly easier to start them at your home when they're small.
Yeah.
It's hard to dig a big hole.
Remember one of the things that we talked about when we took our little park walk was possibly planting down at the water, where replacing some of those live oaks that.
Yeah, and we had talked about maybe something like a bald cypress down there. They sort of protect against
Or
erosion.
red cedar. Or,
Yeah. Well, I personally like red cedar. I think Rich has thought as well. We already got a bunch of them in there. So I don't know.
The other thing too is when you're thinking about where to plant, when we did our walk, I know that dredging Mary's Creek, they're talking about, and maybe Chad, you know something about this, having to remove the spoils from Mary's Creek along there somewhere, either from the town park property or behind Bill's restaurant, and loading it rather than pumping it, right? That's my understanding. They're going to truck it out.
I'm not sure. I'm not really in on a lot of those dredging conversation. I think you're right. So, I mean, a lot of this would probably need Rich, probably, and me and Candace probably need to get with Dustin and walk the park like we did last year.
Yeah, that would make sense.
Figure
Because
out-
they also have to be able to get water to these things.
Well, I mean, water's not an issue. I'm not worried about that. I'm not worried about the town being able to water it. I think the biggest thing that concerns me, the bigger you go, the more cost thing it's going to be. So planting a tree and how big it is going to eat into the budget. Again, I'm not worried about watering it. I think town will be able to public works be able to devote enough time to be able to do that and make it happen, make sure it doesn't die. It's just figuring out where to plant it, what our options are, and planting locations are, because I know that was kind of somewhat of a concern last year. We found an open space and was able to do a magnolia tree. And I think Dustin would probably have the wherewithal to be very protective of making sure nothing's planted and the dredging affecting it. So
I think the dredging and offloading is going to be more over in Turtle Creek than Mary's Creek.
Is it?
Yeah.
Okay.
you can dump it in my bin.
That was my impression from what I heard him talking about.
Yeah, I thought my impression was Mary's Creek, but that's okay.
Well, to me, that would be very disruptive in that area,
Yeah, it would.
but I don't know.
But it's right next to the road.
Yeah. Okay, Mila and Candace, thank you for all the work you're putting into this. What do we look forward to in January? What are we trying to get done for?
Hopefully we have the parking.
Yeah, we'll meet with
Forms.
businesses. Yeah, around about parking. Just one more thought I had about that. If the local businesses would like to come up with some environmentally friendly packaging and have a little stand with food as an exchange for parking, could we consider that? Yeah. And the last thing, we were talking about maybe finding some musicians, live musicians for the event. So if anybody knows anybody, let us know. We'll approach them. Do we have any budget for that or not? music?
I know it was not budgeted for last year. So.
Okay.
That one band who
Well,
came to play for the pets, that pet event.
Mm-hmm.
Trying to think of the band, but they do a Journey. They put on a great show.
But they need to be paid, right?
No, they donated their time, I think, for that one.
Well,
Do you know the name of the
Sea
band?
and Sand Band never takes a salary. They just put a tip jar out.
Could you send me their names of
Oh,
those
yeah.
groups, please? Okay, thank you.
But yeah, I think it's a great idea.
That would attract people. That's all I have.
Okay, thank you very much.
Mhm.
One other item under the Green Subcommittee is the Tree City USA application. And I know Chad has worked long and hard to try to get an application accepted and approved. And we found out this year in the fine print that we need to have a whole new ordinance in the town for the care of trees on town-owned land. The UDO and the town ordinances apply to trees on its own property. I say that correctly, where Tree City USA is looking for something that addresses tree activities on public-owned land. So we're going to get together in January and figure out what we need to do to have everything in place by the time the application period opens up next year. It was just kind of in the fine print, and none of us saw it until the last minute, and then it was too late. So, okay, recycling.
I have something to report, actually. I had an email from Tara Drop or Droop. What's D Drop?
It's,
Tara?
yeah, she's our finance director.
Okay, I wasn't sure how to pronounce her last name. With information that I'd asked her to gather on the number of recycling carts we have this year versus last year, and she sent that stuff to me yesterday, and I didn't see it till this morning, so I have not had a chance to look at it to see what it says. But I thought maybe I could pull that stuff together and maybe put it in a some kind of format that would help us to easily see how many more recycling carts we have versus 2021. Then compare that to the growth in the town and see if that tells us anything. This was pretty much Candace's idea, so I'm not sure what will come of it. I'll have to put all these numbers together and see what we've got. So that will be something I guess I could report to the
I think the goal was to see if we're making any impact.
Yeah,
with our
yeah.
efforts.
It's,
And now, because we had the price increase for it, to see what impact that has.
that may be included. As I say, I have not looked at the email, so I don't know what.
It may not be there. It may
Yeah.
not be the whole thing, but these are pieces we.
So it's a start. The other couple other things I have not done that are on my to-do list at home, which is a good thing, is contact Mickey at GFL to see if she could come to the Earth Day on the 22nd of April, give a presentation, and also her replacement to see if she could come down. She's real new and doesn't know a whole lot yet, so I'm not sure how valuable she would be, but I think that getting Mickey would be a better step. Also, two other things. I had forwarded to the CAM, I'm not sure what the acronym stands for. They help HOAs in the area with all kinds of things. They manage our HOAs money and what have you, but they also have access to the HOAs that have newsletters and get her some information on a monthly basis about the recycling and how it's done and so forth. I've done that with our HOA person. I did it for 3 or 4 months back in this year. I've stopped it, so I need to do that again. So that will be churning, hopefully. And finally, I am giving a talk to our men's group at church, Seaside United Methodist Church, on how recycling and the United Methodist Church work together. Now that sounds kind of odd, but as it turns out, the Book of Discipline for the United Methodist Church, which is our guiding rules, you might say, talks about recycling and how good it is to preserve God's creation. And there's a whole page of things we should be doing. So I'm going to be at their meeting January the 2nd, and I've invited Candace to come to evaluate my talk to see if it's too much, not enough, too complicated, or and so forth. And I'm going to hand out the magnet guidelines and hopefully get about 30 or 40 bags to hand out to the men in attendance. And I'd be happy to come to another group if you are associated with the group to give a little dog and pony on that.
One good thing you mentioned about the HOA is just the thought. Like
Yeah.
they have these like Waccamaw and I'm trying to think of the other HOA. They provide fee. They tell you people what their HOA due is. You know, you might. Nobody wants to pay a higher HOA due, but you might want to say, you know, have them present to their homeowners, like, if you do want to provide recycling, here are the benefits, here's the extra fee, and we'll provide a garbage can.
Well,
Recycling can.
I think we had talked about that maybe in a previous meeting or two. Maybe part of the issue, for example, in Sea Trail, is that they've got the condo units, but they don't have recycling there, and it's hard to get room to put a recycling bin, large
Just for
bin.
the homes. Though.
Yeah, but for the homes,
not for the condos.
you know, so I'm sure the town lost some subscribers to the recycling because there was a price increase. So anyway, I'm going to go through all those numbers and pull something together. HOA dues vary quite a bit from HOA to HOA. Ours are fairly small, but some have really large, big HOA dues because they have a clubhouse and so forth. We don't have a clubhouse, so
Yeah.
But I'll keep that in mind.
Okay. Thank you, Don. Last item of new business is a notice, a reminder to everyone on the committee that in January we will vote to elect a chairperson, a vice chairperson, and a secretary for 2023. This was something that was voted on earlier this year by the committee. That should be done every year. So we'll do that. So if anybody has an interest in doing any of these positions, they should think about it, and if they have questions or they want to talk about it, they can talk to Chad or Lisa or me about it. I will say this personally, I've been the chair of this committee for several years. And sometime in the future, I'm not going to continue doing this. So I would be willing to do it for another year if that is the pleasure of the committee. But if someone else is strongly interested in taking this going forward, I would support that, and I would be willing to help in any way make that kind of transition.
And
again,
I am willing to give up vice chair. I don't have any strong interest in doing it again. So throw your hat in the ring if you see fit to do it.
So whoever's not at the next meeting.
That's right. That's right. That's the way this works.
They got all three jobs.
And Steve, you've been secretary this year. Generally, that's about as much fun as anybody cares to have. But if you want to, it's your choice. You don't have to announce it today.
Okay.
But we will have that on the agenda for next month.
Well, the vice chair, really all that person does is obviously, and the chair is asked he or she conducts a meeting, but secondly, we do have an agenda meeting with Chad usually about a week or so before this meeting, so it's not a whole lot of work. Um,
I'm hoping that next year, I had to deal with a lot of my issues with my father, so it's sucked a lot of my time away. I mean, so I'll have probably more time, you know. But
Okay. Any other questions or comments?
When is the next meeting?
The next meeting is January the 18th.
18th?
Okay.
2023. Ooh.
yeah.
The town council meets on January 9th. So those are the meeting dates for January.
Okay.
And I will call for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
There's a second?
It's the second.
All in favor? Aye. Thank you very much.
Merry Christmas and Happy New Year.